Techno music and
Techno music and swords. That was like the 90s right there.
That was all the 90s.
Isn't it weird how dated, how poorly aged the 90s cool is? Mm-hmm. The Matrix, black trench coat, techno music period that is just aged horribly.
So you want to know what 90s cool is? With such great knowledge comes a choice. You can take the blue pill, click off this video, the story ends, and you can believe whatever you want to believe. You can take the red pill, continue watching, and I'll show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Or you can take both, and we'll party like it's 1999. Welcome to the real cool. What makes something 90s cool? To figure this out, I analyzed a number of films, anime, comic books, and video games with a team of hot rocket scientist babes, and here's what we came up with. The core tenets of 90s cool. 90s cool is all about style over substance, and therefore, its fashion, looks, and atmosphere is extremely important in creating the coolest thing possible in the 90s. You have characters dressed in all black. Leather, leather, and more leather. Leather jackets, dusters, and trench coats galore. And of course, sunglasses. Bonus points if they're worn at night. The protagonist and main characters of the film are often dark, brooding, and mysterious. Bonus points if they're anti-heroes. There are elements of cyberpunk or modernized dark fantasy, such as vampires, werewolves, and witchcraft. There should be more guns than people on screen, explosions galore, and a 90s cool staple, diving, dual-wielding gunfire. There should be plenty of martial arts action, especially of the gun-fu and wire-fu variety. The film takes place in an urban grunge dystopian setting. The soundtrack is dated and very period-specific. It should have all the coolest music genres from when the film took place, including EDM, especially techno, post-grunge, industrial, and later nu metal and plenty of butt rock. A film doesn't need to have all of these elements to be considered a 90s cool movie, but the more elements it has, the better. Here are some other prominent elements of 90s cool. Now that we understand what 90s cool is, let's go over some of its history. For my research, the genesis of 90s cool came from 5 primary influences. Number 1. The action craze of the 80s through early 90s. Action movies were king in the 80s and early 90s, with action stars like Arnold, Sylvester Stallone, and Bruce Willis rising to the top of Hollywood. 90s cool takes a lot of influence from films like Rambo, Terminator, and Die Hard. Number 2. Hong Kong cinema. Along with the rise of action in the West, you had plenty of awesome martial arts movies in the East that grew increasingly popular. The most prominent of these being Jackie Chan movies like Police Story and John Woo's shoot-'em-up movies that served as a huge inspiration for future action filmmakers. Number 3. The influence of anime. Although it was not yet mainstream, anime became a cult favorite and had a huge influence on Western filmmakers. Movies like Akira, Vampire Hunter D, and Ghost in the Shell are a huge influence on the genre. Number 4. Counterculture, fashion, and music. Dressing in all black and leather was always cool. But the film that really makes the black leather and sunglasses look take off is 1987's The Lost Boys. From there, many people in underground circles started adopting this style, and it grew increasingly popular in the mainstream. At the same time, dark and moody music became the norm and started being featured in film soundtracks. Number 5. The rise of technology and futurism. In the 90s, technology was growing at a faster pace than ever before, and people were speculating how the internet would change the future. Consequently, many film plots started addressing how technology such as AI and virtual reality would change life as we knew it. In 1994, these 5 influences combined to bring us what I believe is the first true 90s cool movie, The Crow. From there, the genre reached its absolute peak in 1999 with The Matrix. And from 1999 to 2005, everything was trying to be The Matrix. 90s cool reached its death spiral from 2005 to 2009 with a number of terrible movies that felt dated a week after release. In the post-90s cool era, the genre still lives on in a number of ways. John Wick, for example, is a great and refined throwback to the genre that stars the king of 90s cool, Keanu Reeves. Morbius, on the other hand, did it the wrong way and tried to be as 90s cool as possible, which is why it felt like it was released 20 years ago. For the rest of the video, I'll highlight what I believe are the 20 best films the genre has to offer. But first, here are some honorable mentions. And without further ado, here are the top 20 90s cool movies, one movie per franchise. Number 20, Mortal Kombat, 1995. How do you make a movie about a game that's about a bunch of fights with no real plot to speak of? Well, you make a movie with a bunch of fights and no real plot to speak of. Mortal Kombat isn't really a good movie, but it's a very fun and entertaining movie in its own cheesy way. But despite all of its flaws, it's undeniably an influential movie. It was one of the first video game adaptations to fully commit to its source material. But its biggest influence is that music. The music in this movie kicks ass. It pretty much invents the techno plus martial arts thing that just continued for like a decade. Number 19, I, Robot, 2004. I, Robot sees Will Smith don a black leather trench coat to try and walk back his terrible decision of ditching the Matrix for the Wild Wild West. And what we get ends up being the unofficial third best Matrix movie. It creates a really interesting sci-fi world that sometimes feels like it's in this tug-of-war between being a thoughtful sci-fi classic and being a cheesy Will Smith star vehicle. Alan Tudyk steals the show as Sonny the Robot, and the film does a pretty good job convincing you that he's real. All in all, what we got was a pretty good sci-fi movie with interesting ideas. I'd just love to see it remade a bit closer to its original vision. Number 18, Daredevil Director's Cut, 2003. Daredevil is a movie that Bennifer-era Ben Affleck actually cared about and put some effort into. Unfortunately for him, all of his effort was shat on by a terrible cut of the movie. The theatrical cut of this movie is terrible. Trust me when I say the director's cut is a lot better. It fixes a lot of the plot holes and at least makes the movie coherent. No matter what you think of the movie, it is just dripping in 90s cool. I think it's absolutely the superhero representative of the genre. It has everything. The Gothic atmosphere with that dirty, grungy version of New York, leather galore, a hard rock soundtrack that made Evanescence famous, and tons of butt rock from bands like Nickelback and The Calling. The movie is a time capsule of everything that was cool in 2003, and for that, I think it's worth appreciating. Number 17, Mission Impossible 2, 2000. Mission Impossible 2. A movie with a sunglasses to leather jacket ratio that's only beaten by The Matrix. With this movie, John Woo and Tom Cruise set out to make the most dated, early 2000s era action movie in existence, and I'm all here for it. It definitely feels like a movie where all the plot gets in the way of the action. It's like, yeah, virus, end of the world, you want to save this girl you fell in love with 5 seconds ago, okay, whatever. But when that action hits, it hits. So if you're in the mood for some 90s cool action cheese, it's a great choice. Number 16, Tomorrow Never Dies, 1997. Tomorrow Never Dies sees James Bond team up with a prototype for every 90s cool female lead ever, Wei Lin, played by Michelle Yeoh. All the Brosnan Bond movies have some element of 90s cool, so I had to weigh out which was the most between this, GoldenEye, or The World Is Not Enough. And it came down to this. GoldenEye is a little too timeless, so that's out. The World Is Not Enough scores some points for having the most 90s cool Bond gadget ever, the X-ray sunglasses. Tomorrow Never Dies is the most 90s cool Bond for 3 reasons. First, Wei Lin, obviously. Second, the final action scene that has James Bond running around with dual-wielding guns. Third, the villain plot. Our villain here is evil Ted Turner trying to take over all the media and control the world's narratives. Which on one hand is like super 90s futurism, and on the other hand is like really timeless. Regardless, it's a solid action movie with tons of 90s cool action and martial arts goodness. Number 15, Pitch Black, 2000. Pitch Black sees Vin Diesel successfully bring a dark, brooding action hero to the big screen. Something that would never happen again. Pitch Black is a well-paced, suspenseful, and visually appealing movie with an interesting setting. It does what a lot of great horror films do best, in that it's not about the cheap thrills and scares, but it's about how the monster impacts the characters. Watching the crew fall apart and seeing Riddick go from this pure evil monster to a slightly less evil monster is really thrilling. It's well known for having an extremely grueling and difficult production. Like a lot of lightning in a bottle movies, these circumstances perhaps work to the film's benefit, as you see a lot of what's happening off-screen, on-screen. Overall, Pitch Black is a hell of a time with plenty of 90s cool darkness and angst. Number 14, Hellboy, 2004. Hellboy is about a demon named Hellboy who was released by Rasputin to help the Nazis. But after the Nazis' plans are thwarted, he instead becomes a hero who kills evil monsters for the government in secret. Despite knowing nothing about the Hellboy comic series, when I saw this movie in 2004, I loved it. The best part of the movie to me is its characters. Ron Perlman as Hellboy is just awesome. He's this gruff, grizzled action hero who also has the immaturity and personality of a teenager. Doug Jones delivers this incredible performance as Abe Sapien, and the prosthetics and special effects that they use to make Abe come to life are just incredible. For me, what mainly holds up about the movie is its production value. It really feels like you're looking at a comic book or graphic novel just put on screen. The special effects still look pretty good to this day, and I think a lot of it comes down to the fact they used a lot of practical and prosthetic effects. It's too bad we'll never get the planned third movie in the series because the actors are getting older, but you know, the secret to never looking old is never looking young. So I still hope to this day that Ron Perlman has one more left in him. Number 13, Constantine, 2005. Most people either see Constantine as a horrible adaptation of the Hellblazer comic series or a really solid horror action epic. Since I've never read Hellblazer, I'm in the second camp. If you take it on its own terms as this angels versus demons horror action movie, it's a good time. I love the world and mythos that it creates, and I love its depiction of hell on screen. Keanu Reeves does a good job delivering the chain-smoking, cynical action hero Constantine. Tilda Swinton gives this uncanny, creepy, and twisted performance as the androgynous angel Gabriel, and the one who really steals the show is Peter Stormare, who is perhaps the greatest devil ever put on screen. He is just dripping with malice and evil while also being playful and just chewing up the scenery. So if you're looking for something that's like The Matrix meets The Exorcist, give it a shot. Number 12, Underworld, 2003. Underworld is pure gothic sexiness. In it, you have Kate Beckinsale, the most vampire-looking woman who ever vampired, in the hottest leather outfit of all time. And there's some kind of plot, like something vampires, werewolves, action. Oh my god, just look at that outfit. And they also got shirtless Scott Speedman for the ladies. Sexiness aside, the movie is pretty good. Its best feature is its dark, gothic atmosphere and its pretty good lore and mythology. And this mythology was so quote-unquote inspired by Vampire the Masquerade that they actually got their asses sewed off. The action is full of that stylish 90s shooting and wire fu that we all know and love. There's a romantic subplot that just feels rushed and forced, but it's like, that's not what we're here for. The first Underworld was another solid horror action movie that led to a decent series of vampire movies, but sadly none of them would ever quite live up to the first. Number 11, Face Off, 1997. Face Off is one of those examples of you can make anything work in movies. On the surface, it's one of the dumbest film concepts ever conceived. A cop has to have his face surgically removed and swapped with his evil criminal nemesis in order to infiltrate his evil plans. The concept just begs so many questions. Thankfully, the film doesn't dwell on any of those questions, and everyone involved just knows exactly what movie they're making. First, you have John Woo at the top of his game. All of the action staples from his Hong Kong movies are here, but on a Hollywood budget. But the real stars of the show are Nick Cage and John Travolta. John Travolta was at the peak of his fame at this time, coming straight off of Pulp Fiction, and he does a fine job doing a Nick Cage impression. But as you would expect, Nick Cage completely steals the show. His acting as the villain is just so deliciously evil and over the top and just inspired countless memes. And his John Travolta impression is just hilarious. Just watching Nick Cage's performance in this movie is worth the price of admission. Number 10, X-Men 2000. X1 is equal parts a trendsetter and a trend follower. On one hand, it was the first true blockbuster superhero movie that set the stage for the superhero explosion. On the other hand, it basically followed every hot trend at the time. The action has this wire-fu sort of feel just straight out of the Matrix. X-Men is usually pretty dark and adult, but the movie turns it up a notch, especially by making Wolverine its protagonist. Wolverine is the most 90s cool comic character ever. Dark, brooding, beer drinking, cursing, leather wearing, motorcycle riding. I mean, hell, he has 3 swords in each hand. And this is just a little side tangent, but have you ever noticed that Wolverine is not nearly as big as he once was? Like when I was a kid, Wolverine was it. But these days he doesn't feel like one of the big guys anymore. He feels more like your dad's favorite superhero than anything. The later movies in the series would branch out and find their own identity, but this one just feels really of its time in all the right ways. Number 9, The Boondock Saints, 1999. It seems to me that these days the online sentiment towards this movie has grown a little colder. A lot of people say it's crass, tasteless, violent gun porn that only a teenage boy would love. And to that I say, yeah, and? The Boondock Saints is a movie that every kid who watched a Tarantino movie for the first time dreamed of making. It's a juvenile power fantasy, plain and simple. You have 2 brothers who decide to become goofy versions of the Punisher and eradicate evil by going around killing all criminals. The movie is just totally on their side the whole time, and there's not a lot of room for thought. It's just shootouts and dick jokes, full stop. Willem Dafoe just steals the show as this flamboyant detective who's searching for the Saints. He's just having so much fun in every scene, just gloriously chewing up the scenery. Every part about it is just bursting with 90s coolness. Sarcastic, crass, real dialogue, the black jackets and sunglasses, dual-wielding pistols, and of course the smoking. God damn it, smoking, why must you kill so much and look so cool doing it? Number 8, Desperado, 1995. Let me make this one short and sweet. Desperado is one of the sexiest action movies ever made. Antonio Banderas and Salma Hayek make the sexiest on-screen pair of all time, and it's not even close. The movie does a great job selling Banderas as El Mariachi as this ridiculously badass protagonist. Steve Buscemi does a great job in the opening scene selling El Mariachi as the coolest gunslinger in the world. It has some of the most wacky 90s cool weapons ever, a guitar case Gatling gun and rocket launcher. I mean, is there anything else that even needs to be said? There's a freaking guitar case rocket launcher. Number 7, Equilibrium, 2002. Equilibrium was always on TV in the 2000s, and I just loved it from the first time I saw it. In its world, people have started taking drugs to lose their emotions, and anyone caught not taking their meds is a sense offender, which is a crime punishable by death. It does a great job establishing its futuristic dystopian world, and it gives many subtle nods to things not always being what they seem. Christian Bale gives an awesome performance as a cleric who's pretty much gun Jesus, and his performance just adds this gravitas to the movie. There's a fine line between ridiculous and amazing, and the gun kata scenes in this movie are just chef's kiss. If you can totally suspend your disbelief, I think gun kata is just the most badass martial art ever put on screen. And therefore, the final battle, which is a mix of gun kata and sword fighting, is just spectacular. Equilibrium took all the best parts of the action from Blade and The Matrix and just ran with it. Number 6, Dark City, 1998. If you've never seen Dark City before, look up nothing about it and watch the director's cut. Thank me later. But to keep this brief, Dark City is a dystopian sci-fi epic with a surreal, dark atmosphere. It famously has a lot in common with The Matrix, both plot-wise and visually. And I mean, hell, it even shares some of the sets with The Matrix. Everything about its world is strange, uninviting, and disturbing. And all of this is designed to kind of put you in the perspective of its main character. And my favorite thing about the movie is its dark, mysterious atmosphere. Dark City was Alex Proyas' second movie after The Crow, and I feel it's where he really nailed the dark, grungy, rainy city sort of atmosphere he was going for. But for a movie like this that's not as popular, perhaps it's best to leave it there. Absolutely watch it if you've never seen it before and you love dark, gothic, 90s cool movies. Number 5, Kill Bill Volume 1, 2003. Kill Bill is like an anime brought to life. I mean, hell, part of it is actually an anime. I'd be remiss to create a list about 90s coolness without any mention of Quentin Tarantino. Tarantino's early movies like Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction just completely changed the game, and from then on, every gritty crime movie was trying to copy his style. Kill Bill was Tarantino's attempt to not only make an amazing action movie, but one that wore all of its influences right on its leather sleeve. It feels like a perfect blend of the old and the new. On one hand, you have all the callbacks to martial arts, samurai, blaxploitation, spaghetti westerns, and anime movies that all served as great inspirations for this genre. On the other hand, you have all that slick 90s coolness like the leather, the motorcycles, the grit, and the flashy action. I think this blend of the old and the new is best represented by the outfit that the bride wears at the end of the movie, which is simultaneously a reference to Bruce Lee's outfit in Game of Death, and at the same time a contemporary full leather costume. Old reference, new coolness. The story of the bride is awesome from start to finish. Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 are really just one big movie, but as standalone parts, I prefer Volume 1 because it's more action focused. And it has the final action scene in Tokyo, which is just one of the best action scenes ever put on screen. Number 4. Blade, 1998. Blade often gets credit for quietly starting the superhero boom, but in my opinion it doesn't get enough credit for starting the dark fantasy action boom that continues to this day. Without Blade, you likely don't get Underworld, Constantine, Resident Evil, Doom, Blood Rain, Morbius, Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunter. I mean, okay, it wasn't all great, but you get the point. Wesley Snipes' Blade is hands down the most badass performance on this list. Blade just exudes this quiet confidence. Just from his posture and expressions, you can tell he's just one bad dude not to be messed with. The blood rave at the beginning of the movie is one of the greatest character introduction scenes of all time. I just love how Blade looks at the vampires and they're all terrified of him. He's the wolf, they're the sheep. Watching Blade again, I think it really holds up well. To this day, it has one of the most badass sword fights ever put on screen. And I find The Matrix and Blade really interesting. To me, they had so many similar ideas, and they're almost like this unsung pair of movies. Blade had bullet time a year before The Matrix. I mean, it looks terrible, but it actually had bullet time a year before The Matrix. That's crazy. Number 3. The Crow, 1994. The Crow was the first movie to take everything 90s cool and just put it all in one package. The counterculture vibe, the dystopian cityscape, the dark gothic atmosphere, the moody rock and post-grunge soundtrack, the dark mysterious hero, the action, the sword fights. In 1994, The Crow was a box office success, and I think without it you wouldn't get a lot of movies on this list. Blade, Buffy, The Matrix, and many other properties owe a lot to The Crow. But aside from its influence, how is the movie itself? I watched it for the first time when I was 15, and it was everything that dark, edgy teenage me wanted in a movie. And I think it pretty much completely holds up to this day. The best word to describe it to me is tragedy. It's just dripping with tragedy from every pore, not the least of which was the shadow that the tragic death of Brandon Lee cast over the entire film. For me, the main thing that makes the movie special and timeless is Brandon Lee's performance as Eric Draven. For an actor who is only known for basic martial arts movies and for being Bruce Lee's son, Brandon Lee seemed to pull this iconic, unique, once-in-a-lifetime performance out of nowhere. Eric Draven could have easily been this stoic, no-nonsense character, but Lee adds a quirkiness and levity to the character that just makes him totally iconic. I think Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker owes a lot to Brandon Lee's performance here. I think his career would have been absolutely huge had he had lived on. But I'm glad that at the very least he got to show his incredible talent in The Crow and left a legacy that will last forever. Number 2. Fight Club, 1999. Fight Club is the perfect representation of the dichotomy between conformity and rebelliousness that Gen X faced in the pre-9/11 world. This dichotomy is represented by the film's two lead characters. First, you have the narrator played by Ed Norton, who was the good boy who did everything he was told. He lives a completely joyless, miserable life with his crappy corporate office job, having to kiss his boss's ass, wears the suit and tie, buys a bunch of pointless crap that he doesn't need to please people he doesn't even like, until one day he realizes that he's completely wasting his life. Then you have Tyler Durden, played by Brad Pitt. Tyler Durden is the ultimate representation of 90s cool captured in one character. He's a good-looking, rebellious, chain-smoking, leather jacket and sunglass-wearing badass who's free from the shackles of a normal life. And when these two characters meet, they set off a course of events that would change the fate of the world. Fight Club has everything that was cool about 90s counterculture, with its dark, grungy atmosphere, its soundtrack with plenty of techno and alt-rock, and themes of anti-consumerism, masculine stoicism, and nihilism that spoke to a generation of angsty young men. Most people who watch Fight Club for the first time have that mind-blown, eyes-wide-open moment. Like, yeah, society has tricked me into believing I need to be something I'm not and live this miserable 9-to-5 life that I hate. This revelation ultimately amounts to an anarchistic power fantasy that breaks down with any real critical thought. But when you're watching Fight Club, in the moment, you're totally right there with Tyler Durden. And I think it's impossible to watch Fight Club without it leaving some impression of how you view your life and the world around you. Number 1. Spawn, 1997. Spawn and Blade were released close together and tried many of the same things. Both were dark, gothic, and violent superhero action movies starring black main leads. And in every way that Blade succeeded, Spawn failed. Yeah, Spawn isn't actually number 1. Number 1. The Matrix, 1999. The Matrix defined what cool was for an entire generation. From about 1999 to 2003, The Matrix was it. Leather jackets, sunglasses, bullet time, martial arts, the special effects, the philosophical themes that blew your mind. Everything wanted to be The Matrix. It was parodied everywhere. Shrek, Scary Movie, you name it. As a little kid, I was a huge fan of the Backstreet Boys, who were the biggest musical act in the world for a hot minute. And I remember when they were at the height of their fame and they released their video for The Call in 2000. The video just completely ripped off everything from The Matrix. The biggest movie star on the planet, Tom Cruise, ripped off The Matrix in his flagship series Mission Impossible. It was all over video games. Celebrities were showing up to the red carpet dressed like characters from The Matrix. It was just the zeitgeist of that time, and people kind of forget that. And I mean, what can I say about the movie that hasn't already been said? It's incredible, and it's my favorite movie of all time. I periodically just watch scenes from the movie on YouTube just to get that nostalgia. The training scene with Neo and Morpheus, the subway fight, the most underrated fight in the movie, Morpheus versus Agent Smith, that part is freaking awesome. I think what really makes it special is it took everything that was cool from that time and put it into one seamless package. You have the dark, dystopian feel of The Crow, the mystery of Dark City, an incredible soundtrack with music that's gone on to become a staple of every YouTube essay and college study playlist, the mind-blowing philosophy of Fight Club, the amazing action of Blade. It totally set the benchmark for every action movie moving forward. But just to conclude this list, I always find it funny that the machines set the world of The Matrix in 1999 because they called it the peak of human civilization. And then I wonder if the Wachowskis were time travelers, because it seems to me they were totally right. So anyways, that's all for the list. Thank you for joining me today to revel in some 90s coolness. Please subscribe and join me next time where we'll look at the absolute worst that 90s cool has to offer. I promise you this list has a lot of wonderfully terrible and cheesy movies that you've totally forgotten about and you don't want to miss it. So anyways, see you next time.